Hi everyone, I'm here today to recommend 50 books to you, and I think that's more books than I've ever recommended in one video before. And the reason that I'm doing that is because it's National Poetry Day. Happy National Poetry Day. So I decided to raid my poetry bookshelves, which is why they look like this, and pick out 50, because I thought that sounded like a nice number, books to recommend to you. And I'm challenging myself to quick fire, recommend them to you, sum them up as quickly as possible, and I will link them down below if one of them or two of them or 50 of them sound interesting and you would like to go and check them out. Either they'll be linked and listed in the description itself, or I'll link a separate Google Doc where I list them all, because it may be that 50 books exceeds the word count limit of a video description on YouTube. As I said, it's National Poetry Day, and it's also the day that Books in My Bag announced their Reader Awards shortlist. And I was super thrilled because in the poetry category, my book, The Girl Aquarium, has been shortlisted, and that makes my heart very, very happy. This is not one of the 50 books I'm recommending to you today, though of course I do recommend it, and if you would like to go and check it out, that would be lovely. But the shortlists for the Books in My Bag Reader Awards are picked by booksellers, but the winners are voted for by you, by readers. So if you have read The Girl Aquarium and you wouldn't mind taking a minute to vote for it, that would be amazing. If you vote, you also enter into a giveaway for a chance to win £100 worth of book tokens. That's the giveaway that Books in My Bag are doing, which is pretty cool. Link in the description box down below. All right, 50 books. Let's go. The first one is this one here, published by Yes Yes Books. It's called Beast Girl and Other Origin Myths by Elizabeth Acevedo. As the title suggests, this is about mythology and superstition. My favorite poem in here is a list of Dominican superstitions and how to live your life with regard to those. Next up, we have Kaveh Akbar's Calling a Wolf a Wolf. This is a poetry collection that takes such joy in wordplay and linking imagery throughout the collection. It's about saving yourself. It's about reconciling with the animal within yourself. It's about alcoholism, forgiveness, love, and family. Why God is a Woman by Nin Andrews is a series of connected prose poems set on an island where societal norms are switched, and that's shown through magical realism. Boys grow wings when they become teenagers, and then they become sexually objectified. So it throws a harsh light on our own society through that lens. Next up, The Perseverance by Raymond Antrobus. This is one of my favorite books of last year. Ray is absolutely legendary. I have recorded a podcast with Ray, which I'll link in the description box down below as well, if I can, if there's enough word count. This is a collection that looks at family relations. It looks at how we view the past once we've grown up. It looks at deafness. It looks at race. There's such a kindness to this book, and there is British Sign Language used throughout as well to great effect. If They Come For Us by Fatima Asghar looks at what it's like to live as a young Pakistani Muslim woman growing up in America today. Fatima was orphaned as a young girl, and she looks at what it's like to forge your own family relations going up forward, to choose your own family, and how love and sharing is so often linked in with food. There are so many colours to this collection. It is both joyful and poignant. Folklore by Tim Atkins is a very sparse collection. Lots of words are missing in here, so the words that are there feel all the more important, and those gaps are deliberately left as if they're left in awe, or for you to fill in those blank spaces, looking out at the world around us, asking you to pay attention to things maybe you otherwise would just walk past every day. These feel like a series of postcards or love letters to the world around us. Stairs and Whispers is an anthology. This is edited by Sandra Allard, Karani Barocca, and Daniel Sluman. This is a collection of work by disabled poets and deaf poets, and as you may gather, that's a subject very dear to my heart. I've done a whole review on this for Poetry Review, which I'll link in the description box down below. Emily Berry's Stranger Baby is one of the most beautiful collections of poetry about grief that I have ever read. If If you enjoy Max Porter's Grief is a Thing with Feathers, I think you will like this. She talks about the loss of her mother, and she links that imagery with sea and with fire in a stunning way. Liz Berry is one of my favorite poets. I adore her chapbook, which is called The Republic of Motherhood. I've made a video talking just about that title poem, so I'll link that down below. But I thought I would take this opportunity today to shed light on her full-length collection, which is called Black Country. Many of the poems in this are written in dialect. Liz is from Birmingham and she just writes so lyrically. Harry Lindsay Bird's collection, Harry Lindsay Bird, really made me chuckle. I think if you're a fan of Sally Rooney, then you will like her. The poem in here that made me laugh the most is one about Ross from Friends and how annoying he is. John Burnside is a writer I adore, and I couldn't choose which individual poetry collection to pick for this recommendation, so I just went for his selected poems. If you're into nature and darkness and fairy tales, then look no further. Neil Campbell's Nocturne is about being a new parent. It's about sleeplessness, it's about night feeds, it's about the aching, impossible, horrible love that you have for this being that you have created. Varney Capildeo's collection, Measures of Expatriation, is about searching for the meaning of home within the language that you're speaking so that you can carry home with you wherever you happen to be. Then we have this collection, which is An Ocean of Static by J.R. Carpenter, and I would recommend looking at this in fragments because it's really intense. It's a collection of found poetry, almost a choose your own adventure type, and I'll explain by reading you the very beginning, which says, "Once upon a tide, once upon a high spring slack neap tide, we drifted, coasted, slid, slipped, tacked, past a bay, beach, cape, cove, dune, lagoon." Almost like you can choose the way that they're sailing and the things that they're going past. Choose your own adventure. This is found poetry selected from fragments of documents written by people who have actually been on these journeys. Girl King by Brittany Cavallero is a collection of historical, bloody, feminist fairy tales transplanted into the modern day. These stories cannot be tamed, and the women in them make no apologies at all. Then we have Flesh by Mary Jean Chan. This is a collection that is about queerness and body. It's also about language and about being bilingual, and I adored it. I read it recently and reviewed it, which I'll link down below. Joss Charles wrote this fantastic collection called Field. Joss is a trans poet, and she wrote this collection talking about the American present, massively informed by the medieval past. The spelling in this is akin to Chaucer's way of writing, and she's talking about gender and modern day society through this nonconformist spelling, asking you to pause over these words and question why we try and put things into boxes. People, gender, words. It's extraordinary. This is The Trees by Heather Crystal, a series of prose poems about memory, human error, things perhaps we want to remember but can't, and things we do remember but would rather forget. And she uses gaps and silences, spaces within these prose poems to highlight those gaps in memory, which works really, really well. Kayo Chigoni's collection Kumakanda is all about becoming a man and what that means as a young black man growing up in London, his relationship with poetry and other people's expectations of what his relationship to poetry should be. One of the poems I remember really loving in this collection is a poem that's all about nostalgia and cassette tapes and 90s music. We have Poems from a School, which is an anthology that I've recommended to so many people. It's edited by Kate Clancy. She is a poetry teacher. She teaches at Oxford Spies Academy, and she ran something called the Very Quiet Foreign Girls Poetry Group. She set it up for refugees and migrants and the sons and daughters of refugees and migrants to come and write about their experiences through poetry, things that they weren't comfortable talking about perhaps in everyday life. And then that expanded and grew into this huge project, which this book was the product of. It is some of the most moving poetry that I have ever read. These teenagers are unbelievably talented and everybody should read it. The Exhibit by Lauren Eggert Crow is such a short but powerful collection about what it might be like to externalize yourself as a museum, an exhibit that you can then walk around and observe. We have The Girl Who Forgets How to Walk by Kate Davies, which is about growing up with polio and learning how to walk again, rehabilitation. A Watchful Astronomy by Paul Deacon is about family and memory. His sometimes violent father invades some of these poems. The interlinking imagery throughout is the thing that sticks with me the most when I think about this book. It means that the book itself feels like a constellation of stars. Girls Coming Out of the Woods by Tashani Doshi gives voice to women forgotten in fables that were taught as young children. It means that these voices come out as a roar. These girls are coming out of the woods, out of these fairy tales, and they have got stuff to say back to you. Speaking of answering back, there are lots of different collections I could have picked by Carol Ann Duffy for this, and I decided to pick one that she was the editor of, and this is called Answering Back. It's a series of response poems from lots of different poets who are picking a poem that they loved when they were younger, or looking back on history, picking out an iconic poem and then writing a response to it. I really enjoy studying these ones. Response poetry is something that I find particularly interesting. Blues Triumphant by John Terry Gadsden is all about sculpting yourself out, an image of yourself, a definition of yourself, and getting rid of all of the unnecessary definitions that have been placed on you by other people. It's cyclical in this beautiful way because she looks back on her youth and how she viewed her body then and how she feels about that now as a mother, and then also looking back on her own mother too. So it's generational and it's told with such tenderness. And speaking of tenderness, this is Giant by Richard Georges. This is a beautiful collection that, like with Tim Atkins' folklore, is a bit of a love letter to nature. And I love these lines here which say, "What else is poetry except a drunken faltering through the darkness?" Young Tambling by Kate Greenstreet reminds me of Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. It's extremely meta. Our narrator, a young girl, is plonked down into a forest, into a narrative that has been told by men historically, and she then tries to escape this forest and the stories of other people in order to find her own path. Undying, a Love Story is a collection of poems by Michel Faber that he wrote after his wife Eva died. These are some of the most brutal poems I think I have ever read. Fair Copy by Rebecca Hazelton is a collection that she wrote in an attempt to try and better understand Emily Dickinson's poetry because she wasn't really getting to grips with it. So on her 29th birthday, she decided to take the title of the first line of every 29th Emily Dickinson poem and then use that as the basis for an acrostic. And this is the product of that, and I think it's great. The Jitters by Anne Cecilia Holmes is a collection of poems, I would say, about anxiety and about trying to calm yourself and piece yourself back together. There's a line in one of these poems which says, "I call you to say I'm not a ghost yet." Ted Hughes' collection Crow I had to mention. If you love Grief is a Thing with Feathers by Max Porter, then please read this, which is the basis of a lot of the imagery within Max's book. This is the first collection of poetry that I read where I realised that poetry could be ugly and successful in its ugliness. I read this as a teenager. It's about humanity's need to feel godlike. Everyone Knows I'm a Haunting by Shivani Ramlokan, I would say at its core, is about violence against women, and it's about rebuilding the self after trauma. Say Something Back by Denise Riley is a collection that she wrote after the death of her son. This is about loss, the longing to hear back. It's almost like the opposite of response poetry because she knows she's not going to hear back from him, but she's going to shout out into the darkness anyway, knowing she's only going to hear echoes of herself and also the experiences of other people who've been through similar things. Sarah, or The Existence of Fire by Sarah Woods, is a collection that she's written about her reimagined childhood. Sarah is a trans woman, so she's writing the imagined past of her young self, the young girl that she was never allowed to be. And so she goes on epic adventures with her dog, and it's really joyful and a bit like with Young Tambling, it reminds me of Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland. Wade in the Water by Tracy K. Smith. The middle section of this collection is found poetry made up of letters by African Americans who were enslaved, writing to the government. pleading their case for freedom. And in doing that, she creates this chorus of voices, a collective history, a rebuilding of history, and it's so immensely powerful. Don't Call Us Dead by Dinez Smith is about growing up in the States as Black, as queer, as HIV positive. I've also recorded a podcast with Dinez where we talked about poetry, so I'll link that in the description box down below. Then we have The Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Ocean Vuong. This is just, you can tell by the smile on my face, this collection makes me smile. The way that Ocean uses language is extraordinary, and he only learned to write, I think, at the age of 16. In this, he is writing about violence passed down throughout his family, about the cultural differences between Vietnam and the US, where he lives, and growing up queer as well. Houses by Nikki Walshinger is one of the most beautiful collections I think I've ever read. Each poem is about a different coloured house, and it's eerie. Each house gets its own voice and talks about its fractured memories. It is about societal expectations and judgment and gun violence. It's phenomenal. Slantlight by Sarah Westcott is a collection with such precision. You can see the craftsmanship that has gone into this. Each poem feels so heavy with imagery and meaning, but effortless at the same time, which is exactly what you want from a great poetry collection. The Displaced Children of Displaced Children by Faisal Muhyiddin is, as the title would suggest, about displacement. It's about refugees. It's about search for home. It's about the passing on of displacement too, how different members of one family can call different locations home, and how surreal that is. The impossibility of trying to find a home that is lost. Some Planet by Jamie Mortara is such a playful collection. If you're new to poetry, I think this is one that I would encourage you to gravitate towards. Some of these poems are in the format of flowcharts because, you know, why not? Miriam Nash's collection, All the Prayers in the House, is set on an island. It is about body, it is about the sea, it is about lighthouses. It's ticking, you know, all the boxes of things that I enjoy. Shrines of Upper Austria by Phoebe Power reads like poetry journalism, trying to create a narrative history of Europe by selecting fragments of other people's voices chronicled by one traveller. How memories can contradict each other too, I think in the current climate, is quite apt. I would say the thing that most drives Not Here by Human Win is curiosity, and that curiosity is painfully sad and also delightful. It's about desire and sexual identity. It's also about the speaker's relationship with his mother and how that changes over time, and all the possible ways that that relationship could go in the future. Falling Awake by Alice Oswald is an exquisite book about nature, about a reawakening. Not just when you're asleep, but a waking up when you're already awake and looking at the world around you in a completely different way. It's very much influenced by Greek mythology. The way that she writes about the outside world reminds me of the way that Robert Macfarlane writes about the outside world. They managed to tap into this language and way of explaining things that very few writers manage to get access to, and it's a joy to be taken on that journey with them. Erato by Darren Rhys-Jones is a collection about trauma and about rebuilding the self after trauma via collating the narratives of people who've been through similar things as a means of coping. So the next book is Mama Amazonica by Pascal Petit, and this is set both in a psychiatric ward and in the Amazon rainforest, as it says on the back, an asylum for animals on the brink of extinction. If that doesn't intrigue you, I can't help you. We have Beauty, Beauty by Rebecca Perry. I think that Rebecca is one of the most extraordinary poets that we have today, and in my Dissect a Poem series, I chose one of her poems to analyse and talk about. So I will link that in the description box down below. And finally, the last book I wanted to recommend is an anthology. This is the Forward Book of Poems. Every year, the Forward Prize make a book of what they consider to be the best poetry published that year. This is last year's, so the Forward Book of Poetry 2019. Even though it's last year's, it was published towards the end of last year, so it's called the Book of 2019. I was one of the Forward Prize judges last year, so I was one of the editors of this book. The poems in this are absolutely extraordinary. So if you want a book that gives you a wide range of voices of modern day poets, you go here. So I think that was 50 books. Hopefully that was 50 books. there we go. I will link them all in the description box down below. I would love to know who your favourite poets are. I would love to know if you have any recommendations for me. If you would like, as I mentioned at the beginning, to vote for the Girl Aquarium in this year's Books in My Bag Reader Awards, that would be amazing. I'll link it down below. As I said, you can win £100 worth of book tokens, so that's pretty cool. I hope you have a great National Poetry Day, and I hope you have a great rest of the week, and I'll speak to you soon. Lots of bookish love. Bye.